from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning to you all. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and not Patrick Christie's, but Tom Harwood again on your TV, radio. And online, we're here with you until midday with a show full of today's big stories, lots of political analysis from this expert next to me, and lots of opinion as well.
So make sure you get in touch with your views as usual at gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to all of those throughout the show. We want to know what you hear about these stories. Yeah. But first, it's time for the latest headlines.
A very good morning to you. It's just 1 minute past 10. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, Downing Street is reportedly expecting to receive Sue Gray's report into lockdown parties tomorrow. Well, Boris Johnson is facing fresh questions about whether he lied to Parliament. Leaked pictures published by ITV News show him raising a glass at a leaving do in November of 2020. Well, he told MPs there was no party that day. Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth says it's time for the Prime Minister to quit.
I don't understand how he can reconcile what he said at the dispatch box in Parliament when he said there was no party that day with these photos. Now, you know, in the olden days, lying at the dispatch box was a resigning matter.
Oil and gas companies are urging the government not to enforce a windfall tax. In an open letter, 31 organisations in the UK's offshore energy supply chain say the one-off tax would reduce investor confidence in the UK and have severe consequences. Boris Johnson has already said he's not attracted by the idea of new taxes, but that nothing's off the table. MPs have called for the most senior civil servant at the Foreign Office to resign over what they've described as deep failures of leadership during the evacuation of Kabul. Sir Philip Barton stayed on holiday until the operation in Afghanistan was completed last August. The Foreign Affairs Committee says he showed a determination to avoid unearthing the facts during its inquiry. The committee also says it's yet to hear a plausible explanation on why the Prime Minister approved the evacuation of dogs from the city. The World Health Organization says the monkeypox outbreak is containable, but research meetings will be held to support affected countries. 131 cases have now been confirmed in 19 countries, including 57 in the UK. The virus is usually found in West and Central Africa, mostly near rainforests. Those at highest risk of contracting the disease are being asked to self-isolate at home for 21 days. Crowds have queued for the chance to board Crossrail's Elizabeth Line train, which opened to the public this morning. Hundreds of transport enthusiasts were in central London for the moment the gates opened. London Mayor Sadiq Khan described it as a game-changer that will transform the city. GB News spoke to some of the enthusiasts who were there for the maiden journey.
It was always just a great experience to know that I was on the first one.
There's new technology, there's new trains, brand new stations.
I'm just really excited about, you know, how we can get from A to B in like 10 minutes instead of like an hour on the tube being crammed in and everything.
It is a piece of history, I guess, yeah.
It's an air-conditioned train, it's got more space, it's more comfortable, so really looking forward to it.
Well, meanwhile, the biggest national rail strike since privatisation is a step closer, with a ballot of 40,000 workers closing today. The RMT union is threatening industrial action in a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. It could see services reduced by 80%. Migraine sufferers could find relief from a local anaesthetic. New research has found the infusion of the drug Lidocaine helps to lower hard-to-treat patients' pain. It also reduces the number of days they experience headaches. The academics behind the study at the University of Philadelphia are calling for more clinical trials into the potential benefits. Leading dentists have warned of a crisis in NHS services as thousands have stopped seeing NHS patients. The British Dental Association is calling for radical and urgent action from the government to help struggling dentists. Around 3,000 have moved to seeing only private patients since the start of the pandemic. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Well, good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Tom Harwood, not Patrick Christie's this morning. Well, we're on your TV, radio, online, on the app, everywhere. And we've got a great show lined up for you to kickstart your Monday. So here's what's coming up.
Yes, the British Iranian aid worker Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe says she was forced to sign a false confession by the UK in order to be released from Iranian prison. We look into her treatment and how foreign powers treat their prisoners with an international human rights lawyer.
Yes, and the Elizabeth line has finally opened on the London Underground, but is the over-budget, long-delayed Crossrail project really going to deliver for capital commuters and beyond? Well, our London reporter Alice Porter will be joining us to give her verdict.
And finally, are we sleepwalking into a Terminator-like situation when it comes to artificial intelligence? As Google claims they're close to developing human-level intelligence in machines, we discuss the ethics of pursuing such research with futurist Andrew Iborn.
Futurist is a good title, isn't it? That's all coming up from us and much more as well across the programme. We're here with you until midday as usual. So get your views in as well, GBViews at gbnews.uk, and we'll get to as many as we can.
Well, fresh images have emerged showing the Prime Minister Boris Johnson raising a glass at a leaving party in Downing Street, 8 days after he imposed England's second national coronavirus lockdown, the sort of semi-lockdown.
Yes.
They have sparked fresh allegations that he lied to Parliament. Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, has this package for us.
This was one of the parties the Met was investigating. It was taken on November the 13th, 2020, when England was in lockdown. The question, why some people at this party were fined for breaking COVID rules, but the PM wasn't. More pictures, plus WhatsApp messages and emails between Number 10 staff are said to be on the way when Sue Gray publishes her full report. There'll also be more details about 16 events held over 11 months between May 2020 and April 2021. 12 of those were investigated by the Met, with 83 people fined, including both the Chancellor and the PM, for attending his birthday celebrations in June 2020.
I understand the anger that many will feel that I myself fell short when it came to observing the very rules which the government I lead had introduced to protect the public.
Sue Gray is also likely to name some of the civil servants who broke COVID rules. And it might also answer key questions like why some Downing Street staff were fined for attending a Number 10 garden party in May 2020, but the PM, who was there, wasn't. This will be the warts and all version, after her initial report in January said the Downing Street garden was used for inappropriate gatherings without clear authorisation or oversight. There was an excessive consumption of alcohol in Downing Street and failures of leadership and judgment by different parts of Number 10 and the Cabinet Office. What the report won't answer is whether the PM lied to Parliament when he said this.
And that no COVID rules were broken, and that is what I have been repeatedly assured.
That's the job of Parliament's Cross-Party Privileges Committee. They'll begin their investigation as soon as Sue Gray publishes her report. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
Well, thank you for that, Paul. Tom, I do have to come to you. Obviously, you're our political correspondent. This has been going on for a long time, it seems like. We keep banging on about it, or the media do, at least. You have some views about this in relation to whether the Prime Minister did lie, whether he knew he was lying, given that you've mentioned a few times that the parties, quote-unquote, was reported in the Times at the time.
That's right, and I found last night that this picture of the Prime Minister going to his his departing communication chief's office, a man called Lee Kane, who left Downing Street in November in not the most acrimonious circumstances. This was the Prime Minister walking into that office, giving a speech to the staff there, and then leaving. And this particular event was reported in the Sunday Times that very week that the Prime Minister went and gave a speech to the staff in that office. I mean, it wasn't repeated that he had alcohol there, but does that fundamentally change the nature of the event, given that he was reportedly there not for that long a time?
Yeah, I mean, it does. All of this seems like, lawyer speak in a way, because we're getting into the minutiae of it all and say, well, did it constitute a party if there's alcohol there? Do you think it's a bit pathetic almost that we're now down to this level, given what's going on in the world? I mean, OK, does alcohol constitute a party? Can it be a work party? I mean, who really cares in the end, do you think?
I think not many people have been to a Fleet Street lunch if they don't think that working lunches famously are pretty boozy when it comes to, at least in the olden days of journalism, perhaps in Boris Johnson's days of journalism in the 90s. But no, I do think that there is this contested definition here of what constitutes as work and what doesn't. If you're chatting with your colleagues over a glass of wine, potentially at lunch, potentially at the end of the day, is that technically something that's a work event, or is that something that's a social event? And there isn't a hard and fast rule about that. There's nothing that is completely definitionally tight about that.
And do you think if Keir Starmer is found to have broken the rule, if he's not found to have broken the rules, do you think that will be sort of proof of some inherent hypocrisy or some misapplication of the laws consistently? Because Boris Johnson received a fine, didn't he, for breaking COVID rules, whereas Keir Starmer pretty much did the same thing and may not receive a fine.
I think to many people this will be completely analogous. The grainy picture of Keir Starmer holding a bottle when indoor mixing was banned, with colleagues also drinking and eating curry, how is that different from Boris Johnson holding a glass of wine with colleagues in an office? I mean, it doesn't seem all that different. And if Sir Keir Starmer can argue that that was reasonably necessary for work, then surely Boris Johnson can. And I think the other thing about the Keir Starmer thing is that everyone says, well, this is just the one event, whereas we have heard about a lot of what went on at Downing Street. Well, how do we know it's just the one event? We only know about the Keir Starmer event because a student in Durham happened to film it. Presumably on that same campaign trail, there were lots of evenings where Sir Keir Starmer stayed in a hotel, probably saw a lot of his colleagues and maybe had more than one bottle of wine. Potentially the only reason that there are lots and lots of events in Downing Street is because there are lots and lots of civil servants in Downing Street. And we've had investigative journalism on this for the best part of half a year.
Yeah, well, let's go to some views. Of course, the other thing about Keir Starmer is he said it wasn't pre-planned. Turns out it was in the diary. All a mess.
True.
I guess make stupid rules, get stupid results. That's the end of all of this. That's the bottom line. Karen says, I've decided to drink every time, a strong drink, every time I hear Partygate to numb the pain. Should be blotto before lunch. Well, good luck with that. I think that's a fair enough party game. It wasn't a rave, for goodness sake, says Margaret. Looks like the PM passing through with his red box and stopped to raise a glass to a member of departing staff. What's wrong with that? And then there are lots of emails just basically telling us to stop banging on about it, which, again, I think is fair enough.
And just finally, Jackie Rossi raises a very, very important point here, which is what is more concern to me is who's paying for the alcohol? Is it the taxpayer? Is this on expenses? Well, I suppose it's going to be the taxpayer in any sense, because everyone in that building is paid by the taxpayer, but probably likely through their salary rather than through expenses, I would have thought.
Yes, well, indeed. Well, keep your views coming in about Partygate if you want, if not about anything else.
About why we should shut up about Partygate, potentially. Or about if you've ever drunk alcohol at work, potentially.
Yeah, I think everybody has, hasn't they? Not on shift, though.
Not on shift, no.
After the break, British-Iranian Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe has spoken out against the government that helped bring her home. We look into more of this after this weather.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A cool start to the day today with further showers in places and quite widely. Today is a showery day, although there will be some sunshine away from the showers. And over the next few days, it stays unsettled with low pressure in charge. One low to the east clearing away today, further lows arriving from the Atlantic during the next few days to bring a strong wind and more unsettled weather. But for the start of today, at least, well, despite the fresh feel, there will be some sunshine around, and there'll still be some sunshine away from showers by the afternoon. But quite widely, showers will kick off, particularly inland, and those showers will be lively, hail and thunder possible for southern parts of the UK. In any sunny spells away from the showers, not feeling too unpleasant because of the light winds. Temperatures reaching 18 Celsius in London, 16 for Glasgow and Belfast. And later in the day, the showers become more focused further east. A slot of clearer air arrives from the west, allowing temperatures to dip quite widely into the single figures and perhaps a touch of ground frost briefly for sheltered parts of Scotland. But by the end of the night, more rain arrives from the west and the wind picks up. And that sets the theme for Wednesday. It's a wet and windy start for northern and western parts of the UK. Brighter for the southeast, but even here it turns cloudy and breezy by the afternoon with some spots of rain. The rain in the west moves east, turns to showers, and there will be some sunshine arriving by the afternoon away from those showers. But it's blustery with the risk of coastal gales for exposed northwestern parts of Scotland and feeling cool in that breeze. But temperatures not deviating far from average. Thursday's another breezy day with rain in the north replaced by showers later. Drier and brighter weather moves up from the south by Friday.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question. Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices. With honest and civilised conversation. We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:18 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki, and Tom Harwood on GB News, live on your TV, online and radio.
Yes, well, British Iranian aid worker Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, who was detained in Iran for 6 years after being accused of being a spy by that regime, has spoken out against the UK Foreign Office. She accuses them of being complicit in forcing her to sign a false confession as a condition of her release.
Yes, well, in a 20-page letter to Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, Zaghari-Ratcliffe said doing so had, quote, taken a huge personal toll on her and caused her severe trauma. Well, let's turn to David Haig, who's an international human rights lawyer. David, I mean, let's begin with, thanks for joining us. Let's begin with your experience, because you have some personal experience of this, unfortunately, as well. Just remind us what happened to you, and we'll try and sort of speak about what Nazanin must be feeling at this point.
Well, you're right. I mean, I have a personal experience in my own case, but also from others that I help, mostly obviously in the UAE and the Gulf. In my own case, back in 2014, I was effectively tricked to go to Dubai by former employers and effectively locked up for 22 months. 9 months of that was for so-called Twitter abuse, of which I was acquitted. And in that 22 months saw horrors that you can't imagine. I was seriously abused, tortured, sexually assaulted, and all that's been found by an English court. And also in my case, as happens all across the UAE and other countries, was forced to sign a document, which I assume was a confession in Arabic, which I didn't understand. And that's something now that, focusing on the UAE again, every person that we hear, you see every story about a Brit getting in trouble in the UAE or somewhere in the Gulf. That's the very first step. They're forced this document, sign this, sign this. Most people don't speak Arabic. They don't know what it means. They sign it thinking, we want to go home. We want to leave. So it's something that's very common in countries like that, like Iran, like the UAE, the Gulf countries, etc. And we can see in this case, in the case of Nazanin, it's effectively where she's been used as a political pawn. We also saw it in the case of Matthew Hedges, someone else, a young British student, if you remember, a few years back, who was accused of spying by the UAE and forced to sign a false confession as well.
I suppose, is this, I don't want to sound glib, but is this the biggest issue? If signing something that you don't understand, in a language you don't understand, is your ticket out of prison, why wouldn't you necessarily sign it? Is it a matter of honour? I mean, I think I'd probably sign a false confession if it meant that I could return to my country free, even if it meant that I didn't return to the Middle East.
Well, I agree with you. I think, it certainly in my case and in other cases where they've got no links to that country that they're trying to leave from, then obviously, the decision is get home as quickly as possible, provided that you're not leaving anyone behind. But in the case of Nazanin and in the case of others, they obviously have family in Iran, and that confession can be used against them to obviously cause pressure to her. And that's something that if you read I don't know if you've read the letter that was sent by her lawyers at Redress, that's I think one of the concerns, that those so-called confessions can be used against the people that have done them. Of course, if you've got no connection to the country, you want to leave, get home safe, and most people, although annoyed by signing something like that, would rather be home. But it does have ramifications, even if you don't have any links back to that country. If she's effectively agreed, signed a confession saying she committed, as far as Iran is concerned, a serious criminal offence, that's something that will stay with her potentially forever when she travels.
And of course, it wasn't just the so-called false confession that Nazanin signed, but also British taxpayers who handed over quite an extraordinary amount of money to the Iranian regime. Are we going to really, for the next few months, be looking over all of the aspects of this case, a British state scrambling to get Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe freed, and potentially making maybe what some might describe as some errors in the process?
Well, exactly. I think, that's something that, I spoke about this before at the time when Nazanin was released, and the timing was very coincidental or convenient when we looked at the fact that Russia was basically stopping, we were not able to get oil and energy from Russia anymore. So we now needed to start to look to countries like Iran, to other countries, the UAE and Saudi, and we saw Boris Johnson doing a tour of all these Middle Eastern dictators with oil. So the timing, I think, was perhaps not coincidental, but certainly there seems to have been a mad rush to get her back no matter what. And it would be interesting to see the real reasoning behind that. But it's not just Nazanin that is at issue here. The Foreign Office really you know, I've said it before, is not fit for purpose when it comes to protecting Brits abroad. And in Nazanin's letter, but also generally, there needs to be a reform and an investigation of not just what's happened to Nazanin, but an investigation of what is the role of the Foreign Office when it comes to protecting Brits abroad. Are they fit for purpose, and are they performing that role? Because this is something that the work that I now do in helping victims of injustice, we see again and again and again and again. And it's something that needs to change, because otherwise there'll be another Nazanin, there'll be another Matthew Hedges, and it will carry on. You know, there's lots of ways that they could actually consider improving this. But one of, I think, the main issues is that you've got a fundamental conflict of interest in the Foreign Office when it comes to protecting an individual Brit that has got into some issues in the country that they may be in, whether it's a traveller or an expat, plus then the investment that the Foreign Office is looking at from that country or into that country. There's two conflicting issues there.
Yeah, and her lawyers, I believe, have asked the Foreign Office to review its policies on that, torture policies, essentially, and their implementation. So we will keep an eye on what happens with that. Just want to finish finally with, because you are somebody who, as you've just explained, has some personal experience in being captured, essentially, and tortured. Nazanin's lawyers have said she's obviously suffering chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, major depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder. Can you ever really recover from something like this, you know, mentally? Because it's unthinkable for the vast majority of us what she would have had to go through.
I think it's, I mean, talking about my own personal experience, I mean, I came back in 2016 after the 9 months of being jailed for Twitter abuse. And, you know, since then, I've spent about in and out of hospital having treatment that's called EMDR, which helps with post-traumatic stress disorder, probably about 9 months as an inpatient in hospital in those years. And that was exacerbated, as some of your viewers might know, I was also hacked with Pegasus by the UAE, which obviously also causes some mental issues when you're very concerned and paranoid. But it's something that I think certainly for a very long time is going to stay with her. And you know, you're always looking over your shoulder, you're always concerned, always worried. And you know, I'm sure that's something even more so in her case because she has family there and friends there.
Yes, certainly really, really concerning for those who are left behind. Well, David Hay, thank you so much for talking us through that issue. And of course, really, really interesting to hear your own personal experience as well. Really appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. Well, moving on to something else, West Ham defender Kurt Zuma is due in court today after being charged with 3 offences under the Animal Welfare Act for allegedly attacking his cat and recording it on video.
Yes, the 27-year-old was filmed kicking and slapping one of his pets. The RSPCA later removed 2 cats from Kurt's home after the video was released and began liaising with Essex Police about the incident.
Yes, well, our reporter Ellie Costello has the latest on this issue.
Well, this all pertains to a video that went viral in February, which allegedly shows the 27-year-old West Ham footballer Kurt Zuma kicking and slapping his pet cat. And the video also allegedly shows him throwing shoes at the cat and slapping it around the head. Now, it's alleged that his younger brother, Johan Zuma, filmed that video and then posted it to his Snapchat account, where it was then picked up by the Sun newspaper and, of course, went viral. We are an animal-loving nation, and so many people were very distressed by the contents of that video. It led to almost 350,000 people signing a petition calling for Kurt Zuma to be prosecuted and for his 2 cats to be taken into the care of the RSPCA. Well, the animal welfare charity did take those 2 pet cats into care. They are still in the care of the charity, but Kurt Zuma has continued to play for his club, West Ham. They did fine him 2 weeks' wages, £250,000. He is one of the highest earners at West Ham, but he has continued to get the call up, but that hasn't stopped people booing him at several matches that he has played since. Now, his younger brother, Johan Zuma, is also a footballer. He plays for Dagenham and Redbridge, which isn't too far from here in East London. He has been suspended from the club since the incident. Now, Kurt Zuma was also dropped from a number of large-scale sponsorship deals, including the sportswear brand Adidas, and the healthcare brand Vitality are now no longer sponsoring West Ham, they say, over the club's handling of this situation. Well, the two brothers are going to appear this morning at Thames Magistrates Court. They are being brought charges by the RSPCA after an investigation. Kurt Zuma accused of 3 counts under the Animal Welfare Act, 2 for causing unnecessary suffering to an animal, and 1 for failing to protect an animal from pain, suffering or injury. His youngest brother, Johan Zuma, he's accused of 2 counts under the Animal Welfare Act. That's for aiding and abetting unnecessary suffering to an animal. Now, the law changed this year, which caused people found guilty under the Animal Welfare Act to serve now up to 5 years in prison for being found guilty. That has been increased from 6 months that it was up until last year. So these two brothers are now facing potential jail sentences of up to 5 years if they're found guilty.
Well, after the break, will the development of artificial intelligence cost us our privacy and our humanity? But before that, let's have a little chat, because I was thinking we've had some views in about some of these issues with regard to Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, and I think a lot of people have been saying, of course they'd sign a false declaration if that meant they could get home.
Yeah, if you'd been away from your child, especially for years on end, and it was years, I'd be doing anything to get out the door and get out of that country, which was, you know, brutalising her and terrorising her and destroying her life. Of course you would. Well, I would. Maybe some people wouldn't.
No, I think I would as well. Of course, there is the particular worry about what that then means for people at home. But I suppose your key responsibility is to your child. Just one other view I wanted to bring to everyone. Mary has written in, because we were talking about cats and the horrible situation of cat abuse. Well, this is a nicer story about cats. Mary says that she does not subscribe to TikTok, but saw that I did a clip with Larry the cat in Downing Street. And Mary's asking if we can put it on YouTube so that she can see it on her television or show it on GBNews rather than just resting on TikTok.
That might be the same Mary. I saw an email the other day, actually, on the show. I forgot to tell you about this. Somebody was really impressed with that and wanted to see you doing more Larry the Cat videos. So clearly...
I'll have to get back down to Downing Street. Yeah. I'm imagining I'm going to be there for quite a while tomorrow or whenever the Sue Gray report comes out. But, yeah, 500,000 views that had on TikTok. So maybe we should get that back on GB News as well.
Yes, well, we'll be back in just a moment. But here's the latest news first.
Good morning, it's 10:32. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Downing Street is reportedly expecting to receive Sue Gray's report into lockdown parties tomorrow. Boris Johnson's facing fresh questions about whether he lied to Parliament. Leaked pictures published by ITV News show him raising a glass at a leaving do in November 2020. He had told MPs there was no party that day. Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Jonathan Ashworth says it's time for the Prime Minister to quit.
I don't understand how he can reconcile what he said at the dispatch box in Parliament when he said there was no party that day with these photos. Now, you know, in the olden days, lying at the dispatch box was a resigning matter.
MPs are calling for the resignation of Sir Philip Barton over deep failures of leadership, as they described, during the evacuation of Kabul. The most senior civil servant at the Foreign Office stayed on holiday until the operation in Afghanistan was completed. The Foreign Affairs Committee says he showed a determination to avoid unearthing the facts during its inquiry. Hundreds of people queued in central London to be among the first passengers on Crossrail's Elizabeth line, which opened to the public this morning. London's Mayor Sadiq Khan described it as a game-changer that will transform the city. Well, GB News spoke to some of the enthusiasts who were there for the maiden journey.
It was always just a great experience to know that I was on the first one.
There's new technology, there's new trains, brand new stations.
I'm just really excited about, how we can get from A to B in like 10 minutes instead of like an hour on the tube being crammed in and everything.
It is a piece of history, I guess, yeah.
It's an air-conditioned train, it's got more space, it's more comfortable, so really looking forward to it.
TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.249 to the dollar. The pound is 1.66 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,486.30 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:36 and this is To The Point with me, Tom Harwood, and Mercy Moroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and your radio as well this morning.
Yes, now some good royal news. The Elizabeth line opens to the public today and is expected to serve up to 200 million passengers every year, cutting commuters' journey times in half, while GB News' Alice Porter has been speaking to people at Paddington Station about the exciting new line. Here's what they have to say.
Well, there are lots of very happy commuters in London who are waking up today to find out that their commuting time has halved. Before today, if you took a journey from Abbey Wood through to Paddington, you'd have to change trains. It would take over an hour. But as of today, that journey will be about 28 minutes and you won't have to change trains at all. So lots of very happy people who've been boarding the first train behind me at Paddington Station. But it's not just brilliant news for people who are commuting into London, to Essex or to Berkshire as well. This has also been an amazing celebration of engineering in the UK. I mean, the challenge of boring huge tunnels under the centre of London. We have 10 brand new stations that are now operating in London to allow people to connect from A to B. It's much more efficient with people not having to change trains as they go through central London. I mean, this has been one of the largest engineering projects in Europe. Of course, it's taken a very long time, but for the people who are queuing since 1 o'clock in the morning to get on the first train on the Elizabeth line, many of them are very happy to be a part of history, and that's what they were telling me when they spoke to me earlier.
So I've been waiting here since about 4:30 in the morning. I've came down from Glasgow. I've known about Crossrail opening now since I was maybe 10, I can't exactly remember. But it was always a dream of mine to get on the first one coming from Paddington and hopefully go on over to Liverpool Street and get the one coming back. And it was always just a great experience to know that I was on the first one.
I have come from Essex since yesterday morning. I've stayed in a hotel overnight and I'm here to ride the first train from Paddington.
And what are you so excited about with the Elizabeth line? How does it draw your attention?
I'm excited about how quick I'll be able to get from point A to point B instead of taking the tube and changing loads of times and all of that stuff. I'm just really excited about, how we can get from A to B in like 10 minutes instead of like an hour on the tube being crammed in and everything.
It's never been really known to me. It's just trains in general that I'm really excited about. It's not any particular line, but I can't really describe it. I've never been able to describe it before.
It's cool to be part of history. To be able to say in 50 years' time we were on the first train, I think it'd be really cool.
So those were some of the people who've been queuing since 1 in the morning to be some of the first ones on the Elizabeth line train. Now, of course, the whole Crossrail project has been plagued with issues to do with going vastly over budget and also delays. It's cost £4 billion than it was ever anticipated. It's cost more than £19 billion, which is double the amount of money that was spent on hosting the Olympics in London, which I think gives a sense there of the scale of how much money has been involved with this. And of course, it's been severely delayed. It was meant to open in 2018. It's 3.5 years late. But for many people who are here today, who are getting on their trains, it is very much worth the wait.
Incredibly worth the wait. Thank you, Alice Porter, for that package.
Yeah.
And my gosh, I mean, we are sitting in Paddington right now.
Yep.
After this show, I am very much looking forward to hopping on
we were
a journey.
when we were just watching that there, we were saying how enthusiastic some of the people are. Some of them have been woke up extra early, down from Scotland to get there at 4:30 in the morning, just to get onto that first train. One of the people couldn't even articulate himself. He was so excited about going on it.
I can totally understand the feeling. There's something about the London Underground that is just incredibly exciting. I was looking up recently. It was the first Underground line was 1863.
Wow.
That's at the time of Lord Palmerston, before Disraeli, before Gladstone. It's the time of Queen Victoria. It's before the assassination of Lincoln. It's before the unification of Italy. It is.
When
it's
you put it in that
marvel.
context, it's insane.
Absolutely, and it's just completely mind-boggling to think that, Prime Minister Gladstone rode the tube.
Yeah.
I mean, which is just,
I mean, you can't imagine it, can you?
It feels
Because
such a modern thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You can't imagine it. It feels such a part of modern London and modern transportation. I mean, you were saying that the trains are very beautiful as well, and I haven't actually seen
they're so long. This is the remarkable thing about the Elizabeth line, as it's now called. The platforms and the trains are so long, it's taking so much capacity off the rest of the system, that each station has 2 stations to come up from, because the platform is so long that you would pop up at a completely different part of London. So many of the stations, if you get off at one end, you're going to one street, and if you get off at the other end, you're going to a completely different street.
Well, if it has air conditioning, that would be great.
And Wi-Fi.
Oh, that sold me. That sold me.
But the other thing is the engineering of the tunnels. Unlike a lot of the...
We could be here for a while, guys. Strap in.
Unlike a lot of the stations currently in London, where you've got right angles if people are walking from one bit of the station to the other, in the Elizabeth line, it's all very smooth, and you sort of snake around, and so there's no sharp angles, so you won't bump into anyone. It's designed for the free flow of people, which is just an engineering marvel. I like it.
Well,
if you don't, let me know.
Let us know what you think, because some of you have been getting in touch saying it's also London-centric. How does this benefit us in the north? And, that's a legitimate point. Get in touch, let us know what you think. But
should there be a Manchester Crossrail?
Maybe there should, or maybe we don't want to spend that kind of money anymore. Maybe we don't have the appetite. But let's turn now to our next story, a very serious one. The number of hospital admissions for those suffering from eating disorders is increasing year on year, with NHS figures showing there have been 84% more cases this year compared to 5 years ago.
Experts are worrying that the government's requirement for many menus to show calorie contents will make this figure rise even further, as those suffering from or recovering from eating disorders speak out over the concerns of the new regulation. They think that it will hinder further recovery.
Yes, well, here to discuss more about this issue is Dr. Nithya Anandan, founder and medical director at Optimize Healthcare Group, which is a group delivering non-invasive treatment for mental health conditions. Really appreciate your time this morning. We talk a lot in this country, don't we, about obesity, and we always have figures sort of coming out in relation to obesity. Many people don't consider that an eating disorder. We associate eating disorders with things like anorexia. Do you think we don't pay enough to that side of things?
Yes, hello, good morning. Yes, we do. We actually have increasing numbers of patients with eating disorder. It's quite a complex disabling disorder, often unresponsive to many treatment options. We're quite limited both in the NHS and other sectors. We only have intense psychological treatment and some medication options, which often are very limited in response. So in America and many European countries, we do have non-invasive treatment options like RTMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a very safe and a minimal side effect treatment. And there's several research studies which is already ongoing. And combination of psychotherapy with TMS often helps improving the underlying mood disorder, because there's lots of evidence to say patients with eating disorders have underlying depression, anxiety, which often are unresponsive. So I think in the UK, we're going to need a lot of more research to help us look at these new innovative treatments.
And why the rise? We mentioned 84% more cases there. I mean, that's a staggering increase to happen in a relatively short space amount of time. What do you put that down to?
Well, I think there's so much children, young people are so into diet, young children, particularly in schools, and that's one of the main things at Optimize Healthcare. We're keen to engage with schools, parents and teachers, because there's lots of talk about, yes, we agree on healthy eating, but there's so much youngsters looking into calorie counting, being a size 0, being really skinny. So that fear is taken on. And obviously, psychological distress is also an added factor, and often, dysfunctional families or, less supported families also add on to the stress. So it's more like a psychological distress, which they use as a self-harm way, by not eating or excess eating and vomiting.
What extent is government intervention here, making things potentially worse rather than better? This new regulation that all menus must have calorie counts if the restaurant is of a specific size, it's designed to help people, to make people eat less, I suppose, in an overweight nation. But I suppose that has exactly the opposite effect for many people with eating disorders.
Yeah, possibly, yes. I mean, I do agree on where the sugar count has to be reduced, the content of sugar in school meals. I agree on that, because we don't want a population of, diabetes and high blood pressure in the future. But yes, the calorie counting should be done in a sensible way. Children should be taught how to do this, or what is a good healthy eating habit, how to balance their nutrition. And if they're stressed, they shouldn't, use food as their coping strategy. So they need to seek for support. There needs to be more counselling, more pastoral care in schools and universities, because that is where something we're massively lacking.
Well, Doctor, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us. Dr. Nithya Anandan there, who's a founder and medical director at Optimize Healthcare Group. Really difficult condition, isn't it? And you never, especially with social media now and teens being on social media at a very young age, you can't stop the bombardment of certain adverts and things, diet advice, and people still sort of having that really slim, skinny frame, and that's still being perpetuated as the only acceptable body type. That's still around. I mean, if you look at the Kardashians, for example, the only one that's made a modelling career is one of them, who's the tall and skinny one, and she's revered as sort of the archetype Kardashian in the modelling world. So
I thought the thing about Kardashians was they had very big bottoms. I thought that was sort of the whole USP.
But the only one that's made it into sort of mainstream fashion world is, I think her name's Kendall. I don't watch it, I'm glad to say, so that's why I can't remember her name. But now, moving on to something a bit more fun than our last story. Google's artificial intelligence developer DeepMind has said they're close to replicating human-level intelligence in computers. They claim it's all safe, but another AI company called Clearview has just been fined £7.5 million by a UK watchdog for collecting images of people from online photos and adding them to their global database. Billions of images, I believe.
So, is the development and pursuit of artificial intelligence safe, or should we be putting a stop to it? Well, Andrew Eborn is a broadcaster, a lawyer and a futurist who joins us now in the studio, I'm delighted to say. Welcome to the programme.
It's a delight to be on with both of you and avoiding the Kardashians. I think it's a great segue. It's got to be good.
Let's just start with futurism as a profession. It's your job to sort of spot trends and see what's going to happen in the future.
It's absolutely that. And we always say that history repeats itself. And the reason that history repeats itself is because we never learn the lessons from history. And that's what we look at, little patterns in history to say, how can we predict the future? And as you know, I've got a 100% record of predicting the results of elections, predicting what might happen in terms of technology. And they always say, look, where there's a will, there's a way, and necessity is the mother of invention. And I also, in addition to that, celebrate failure. Because if necessity is the mother of invention, well, failure is the father of success. So you look at what might have failed in the past and work out how you can learn those lessons. And the great thing about AI, artificial intelligence, is a seismic moment in history. Because whilst we don't learn the lessons, AI can. And I think what's really important, I try to jargon bust, if you like. What is AI? Well, it's actually been around for about 70 years. The term artificial intelligence was invented by, I think, in 1955. And it's to do with basically learning the science and learning of how machines can learn from various bits of code.
And machines themselves writing that code. We often use the word algorithm as some sort of scary thing. I think one of the interesting things about so much of the internet as we now know it is the algorithms aren't written by human beings. The algorithms are written by computers.
Oh, it's brilliant stuff. And I tell you what, again, jargon busting, there are two types of AI. There's narrow AI, which is a specific task. So you say to Alexa, it's going to happen all around the nation now, Alexa, turn on the lights, it will turn on the lights. It's not...
Apologies to everyone at home whose lights have just turned on.
Alexa, don't tune into any other channel on GBNews. It's got to be good. But the principle there is it's a very specific task. So it's not doing any thinking. It's just listening to the words and it will do that. What we're talking about is basically wider than that, is what the DeepMind stuff does, what's called artificial general intelligence. That's much wider. It's AGI. And what that is, it's a machine that has the ability to understand or learn any intellectual task a human can do without training. So that's when the machine starts to think for itself. And AI, I predicted this many years ago, it's basically been used for all sorts of things, from creating content. So it created a new episode, for example, of the Flintstones in 2018. Wow. What they did, they fed in all the Flintstone videos and said, OK, here's a rough sort of script, produce something. And it was a pretty good recreation on that sort of side. Equity, the Actors Union, I've been warning them for years that actors and voiceover artists and so on and so forth will be replaced by AI, where you're taking people's imagery and creating movies and so on and so forth.
Can I just pick you up on that point? Because I want to get to what do you think some of the more sentimental uses of AI would be? Because all of this tech stuff is far removed from a lot of people in this country. But could there be the potential, for example, of almost recreating a lost loved one in a way, or things like that? Because there are people who would want to do that.
Absolutely. And we've talked about virtual memorials, if you like. I also work with holograms, which is reproducing people. They look and feel and sound like the real artists. It's happening in the world of music and so on and so forth. We all see that. You can recreate. People have asked me to help them recreate their favourite pet. And you can have it in the corner and it will be purring away or barking if it's a parrot. You're working on that sort of basis. So absolutely creating those memories. I've also warned that the new currency is data. Data is the new currency. And the reason people object to it is basically our data is being absorbed. When you fill in these questionnaires and take part in these little experiments on Facebook and 10 years ago and post what you did, Throwback Thursdays and so on and so forth, or have your profile done in AI, so you get a cartoon version of yourself, all of that's basically gathering data. So be very careful. If you do that, open minds. They say forewarned is forearmed.
And yet, looking at all of this, there is the nefarious side. Many people will be aware of the brilliant Charlie Brooker TV show Black Mirror.
Absolutely.
Where there have been many situations where AI goes bad and potentially AI that's more intelligent than human beings could be dangerous. But I suppose to those who say we must stop it, it's very, very hard to stop technology developing. You can't really uninvent things.
Well, it's the rise of the machine, and actually great minds such as Elon Musk, he said it's the biggest existential threat that we have at the moment. Professor Hawking also, he warned about it. He basically said, look, artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. So what you need to do, whilst we're looking at these great advances, you need to work out a stop mechanism, if you like, the sort of red button. I mean, and Dr. Stuart Armstrong responded very recently. He said, if you could misinterpret, if you say prevent human suffering, could say, well, prevent human suffering, you could put them down as they might do it at a vet. So kill all humans, that will stop human suffering. So if the machine is not basically programmed to have a stop mechanism, there are those risks. But at the same time, you don't want to scaremonger. It is tremendous. You can solve diseases. And whilst all the media's been focused on Partygate and terrible wars happening and the pandemic, some fantastic developments have happened. We've had the human genome. We've managed to get the sequencing of that. What that means is we have the recipe, the DNA of being able to cure diseases. And you combine that with AI and fantastic medical advances, we're in a brilliant, brilliant position.
Oh, I do like hearing some good news.
We like good news.
On a Tuesday morning. Thank you so much for bringing us.
I could listen to you for ages, and my gosh, if teachers had your enthusiasm when teaching subjects, we'd have very clever children in this country.
We'd have a Silicon Valley in the United Kingdom. That would be good. Well, Andrew Ebon, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a delight. See you soon.
Yes. Well, now tomorrow is Wednesday, and that means only one thing, and one thing only, because we're once again handing over the show to you. If you're a regular viewer, you'll know what Wednesdays are all about. If you're not, let's tell you about that. What we want you to do is email in and tell us the stories that you think are most important, what we should be discussing, what you're not hearing enough of in the media. And you can email those stories at tothepoint@gbnews.uk. So get those suggestions in, and tomorrow will be a show completely curated by you.
Yes, and keep all of your thoughts coming in as well about everything that we've been discussing so far today. We do love to hear from you, and we've been handed a bunch more of your views, from everything to do with Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe to the London Underground. And just looking at some of them here, Sandra has written in saying, my husband worked within the London Underground system in an administrative capacity, but without... Hang on. What on earth is she saying? Let me just. This is the problem with diving into something before you've actually read it. Here we go. I don't know if it's still the case, but without notice, a whole station could be shut down and all staff could be tested for alcohol or drugs. An idea for Parliament in session.
Really?
What a
is
good
that a thing?
Because this is the thing. Lots of workplaces have drug or alcohol testing, and there are lots of
drug testing.
There are lots of stories about Parliament and what gets up to in there. Perhaps there's a lesson there from the Underground.
There's actually a story doing the rounds as well over the last couple of days about an air steward and an air hostess. What's the man's version of an air hostess?
Air steward.
Well, he decided to, get a few beverages down him mid-flight, and now he's lost his job because you're not allowed to do that, apparently.
No.
He was filmed downing a bottle of wine.
You're only allowed to drink at work if you're the leader of the Labour Party or the Prime Minister.
There you go.
Well, keep your views coming in on all of the above, and we'll be sure to read out more of them throughout the show.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A day of sunny spells and showers for most of us. Some lively downpours with thunder and hail in the south. But it does turn drier from the west later as a little ridge of high pressure moves in. However, it's the low in the North Sea that is driving the showers across many parts of the country during the bulk of the day, and those showers already getting going out there. Some lively downpours and hail and thunder possible for southern parts. It will be gusty in the far northeast, but for many it's light winds, and that means the showers will be slow moving. But also there'll be an improvement from the west later, increasingly sunny spells coming through. 18 Celsius in Cardiff, 19 or 20 in London, 16 for Belfast and Glasgow. Into the evening then, and we're going to see the showers continue for a time for eastern Scotland, eastern England as well. Eventually they die away, and then a slice of clear skies crosses the country. Eventually it's the Midlands, East Anglia and the South East that see the clear skies for longest, and here temperatures dipping into the singles figures, perhaps the low single figures by dawn. But in the west already by dawn, Outbreaks of rain, a strengthening wind as well, so a wet and windy start for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England, as well as Wales. The rain does move its way eastwards. It turns more showery through the day, and after a bright start, the southeast turns more cloudy with some light rain by the end of the afternoon. Similar temperatures to Tuesday, not far from average for the time of year, and it does brighten up in the north and the west by the end of the afternoon with a mixture, once again, of sunny spells and showers. But the showers fade away through the evening, so for many, clear spells again on Wednesday night. But with a keen breeze, it's not going to be quite as cool overnight. And then Thursday brings with it more rain or showers, another blustery day, but the weather settles down on Friday and the weekend.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Tom Harwood, standing in for Patrick Christie's, of course. We're on your TV, radio and online, here for another hour discussing lots today, all of the day's top news, our opinions, expert guests, we've got it all, so stay tuned.
And indeed, get in touch with your views as usual, GBviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to all of those throughout the show, but before we do, here's time for the latest news.
A very good morning to you. It's just 1 minute past 11. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Downing Street is reportedly expecting to receive Sue Gray's report into lockdown parties tomorrow. Boris Johnson held a cabinet meeting this morning as he now faces fresh questions about whether he lied to Parliament. Why? Well, leaked pictures published by ITV News yesterday show him raising a glass at a leaving do in November 2020. Well, Boris Johnson had told MPs there was no party that day. Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth says it's time for the Prime Minister to quit.
I don't understand how he can reconcile what he said at the dispatch box in Parliament when he said there was no party that day with these photos. Now, you know, in the olden days, lying at the dispatch box was a resigning matter.
Oil and gas companies are urging the government not to enforce a windfall tax. In an open letter, 31 organisations in the UK's offshore energy supply chain say the one-off tax would reduce investor confidence in the UK and have severe consequences. Boris Johnson has already said he's not attracted by the idea of new taxes, but nothing's off the table. Shell has been forced to pause its annual general meeting after climate change protesters stormed the boardroom. The oil giant's chairman called off the AGM after it was disrupted for more than half an hour. Sir Andrew Mackenzie has asked police to remove the demonstrators and restore order. West Ham footballer Kurt Zuma has pleaded guilty to charges under the Animal Welfare Act. He's appeared in court after video emerged of him allegedly kicking and slapping his cat. The offences include causing unnecessary suffering to a protected animal and not taking reasonable steps to protect the animal from pain, suffering, injury or disease. MPs have called for the most senior civil servant at the Foreign Office to resign over what they've described as deep failures of leadership during the evacuation of Kabul. Sir Philip Barton stayed on holiday until the operation in Afghanistan was completed last August. The Foreign Affairs Committee says he showed a determination to avoid unearthing the facts during its inquiry. The committee also says it's yet to hear a plausible explanation on why the Prime Minister approved the evacuation of dogs from the city. The World Health Organization says the monkeypox outbreak is containable. Research meetings are going to be held to support the affected countries. 131 cases have now been confirmed in 19 countries. 57 cases have been confirmed in the UK. The virus is usually found in West and Central Africa, mostly near rainforests. Those at highest risk of contracting the disease are being asked to self-isolate at home for 21 days. Crossrail's Elizabeth line is now open to the public. Hundreds of people from across the country queued in central London, hoping to be among the first passengers. Well, Mayor Sadiq Khan described it as a game changer that will benefit the whole country.
One of the lessons we've got to learn is don't stop now. Invest in the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, because we can do this well now. We've learned the lessons. This project will contribute more than £42 billion every year towards our nation's economy. It's already created 70,000 jobs across the country.
Meanwhile, the biggest national rail strike since privatisation is a step closer, with a ballot of 40,000 workers closing today. The RNT union is threatening industrial action in a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. It could see services reduced by 80%. Migraine sufferers could find relief from a local anaesthetic. New research has found the infusion of the drug, Lidocaine, helps to lower hard-to-treat patients' pain. It also reduces the number of days they experience headaches. The academics behind the study at the University of Philadelphia are calling for more clinical trials into potential benefits. Leading dentists have warned of a crisis in NHS services as thousands have stopped seeing NHS patients. The British Dental Association's calling for radical and urgent action from the government to help struggling dentists. Around 3,000 have moved to seeing only private patients since the start of the pandemic. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Tom Harwood on your TV, radio and online. And we've got another hour for you. Here's what's on the menu.
Yes, Downing Street hits back after leaked images appear to show the Prime Minister raising a glass at a lockdown-leaving event, suggesting that the police were aware of the photo but have not issued a fine, of course. This all comes ahead of the imminent release of the Sue Gray's so-called Partygate report.
Quite a mouthful. West Ham defender Kurt Zuma has arrived in court after being charged with 3 animal welfare offences. Our reporter Ellie Costello will bring us the latest on that. It's a case that really upset some people when those videos came out, but we'll give you an update shortly.
Absolutely. Who abuses a cat? Well, the Elizabeth line has finally opened on the London Underground. But is the over-budget, long-delayed Crossrail project really going to deliver for the capital, for commuters and beyond, for the wider country, of course? Our London reporter Alice Porter will join us live to give us her verdict. And we'll be hearing from the London Mayor. Sadiq Khan will be here as well.
Yes, well, that's all coming up and much more as well across the programme, and get in touch with your views. As usual, GBViews at GBnews.uk. Lots of you have been getting in touch already, and keep them coming.
Absolutely, but first, Mercy gives her opinion on the police strip-searching children.
according to reports this morning, a 14-year-old autistic girl was, and I want you to take this in, handcuffed, then thrown into custody for 20 hours, then had her underwear cut off whilst she was menstruating, and then forcibly strip-searched by 6 officers in the presence of male officers. Yes, I know. It's hard to believe this is an actual headline. It sounds like something out of some sick, lawless dystopia. But no, this story is, sadly, from 21st century Britain. It's in the papers today. In the largest police force in the country, no less. Well, the girl, according to her mum, is extremely vulnerable. She has learning difficulties and a history of self-harm. And she only ended up in this situation after being wrongly accused of something she didn't do. That's fact. She was found not guilty of the charge against her by a court of law. And this took place in December of 2020, the same month when another 15-year-old girl known as Child Q was strip-searched at school after she was wrongly accused of possessing drugs. What are the Met actually playing at? There seems to be a stream of endless failures from the force of late. And yes, I know it may be a few bad apples, but it seems that the whole damn tree needs to get a root and branch uproot at this point. So, here you ask, what on earth could have precipitated such a dastardly, remorseless police response? Surely this was an exceptional case. The child surely posed an imminent threat to the public. A bomb threat, perhaps? Because really, what else would possess grown adults to forcibly strip-search a young girl while she's on her period without giving her parents warning in front of grown men? Well, the story goes, this is according to her mother, that the girl was out with friends when an argument with 2 boys erupted, who then called the police and claimed to be victims of an attempted knife-point robbery. Essentially, it was bad policing driven by bad intelligence. Intelligence that seems, and this is speculation, malicious. It seems like malicious and fabricated allegations. If that is the case, it could have easily been your child, it could have easily been my child, stitched up by some petty kids. And as for the strip search itself, it turns out that it was prompted when the police found the young girl to be in possession of what they say was a sharpened stick and a small blade whilst in custody. But these were not weapons intended to harm others. These, sadly, were tools she used to harm herself. And that's not speculation. A court of law actually found the girl in question not guilty, as I said, of possessing a weapon after accepting that she was indeed carrying that for self-harming purposes. Now, the Met is looking into this and says searches to help children safe whilst in custody, that searches help keep them safe, and they are launching an investigation. Well, the Met's Deputy Assistant Commissioner Lawrence Taylor said this, and I quote, "The worst case scenario would be that we stop strip searching in its entirety and a young child dies in custody because they're in possession of a knife or drugs that they use to harm themselves." He also continued, "And we have a big responsibility to keep people safe in our custody. We're responsible for their safety." That's what he said. Look, that's fair enough in principle, but at what point do you, as a grown man standing watching a menstruating teen girl having her underwear cut off in a coerced strip search, say, hang on, lads, this has to be wrong, if not at least disturbingly creepy? The only correct answer, by the way, is well before that whole situation even begins. Common sense, decency and dignity have to dictate so. I mean, let me ask you guys listening and watching, how would you feel if you found out that whilst you'd been isolating at home with COVID, as this mother was, this girl's mother, your autistic 14-year-old daughter had been thrown into the back of a police car, dumped in a police cell for 20 hours and then forced to strip in the presence of 6 adults, some of whom were men? Because I'm pretty sure how I would feel. In fact, I know what my instinctive reaction would be. It's one that I can't say on a daytime programme, not without showering you with an assortment of expletives anyway. And it's probably a response that would see me ending up in the back of a police van as well, because I would never let anybody do that to my daughter without fighting until the bitter end to make sure they were held accountable. Would you? I don't think you would. The Met, from what I can gather, are not apologetic enough about this. They do, however, say they're investigating what happened. But however this was allowed to happen, whichever idiotic overreaching policies and guidelines allowed this to happen to young children, young girls, they need to be scrapped immediately. The police should be there to protect and serve, not to terrorise and humiliate.
It is remarkable that there seem to be multiple instances of this happening. And I just wonder, whenever I go to an airport, they check if I have a weapon on me, they check if I'm importing things that I shouldn't be, and they do it with the use of metal detectors and those woozy things where you put your hands up and go.
Absolutely.
They don't need to strip search you. Why can't police forces use that?
I just honestly think it should be illegal clearly this is in some guidelines, because I highly doubt 6 police officers were misinterpreting the guidelines when they were doing this. But surely it has to be illegal to not consult the parents, and it probably is illegal and they just didn't do it properly, and to do it in front of a member of the opposite sex. And also, while somebody's menstruating, that you shouldn't be forced to strip down and be strip searched as a 14-year-old girl. You know, when you're on your period, whilst there's 6 adults in the room that you have no idea who they are, you've been falsely accused of robbing somebody at knife point, which is completely false. I mean, the trauma that girl must have experienced is unthinkable.
It seems like we've lost the sense of innocence until proven guilty in so many cases.
Yeah.
That's a really, really concerning situation. Well, we'll be talking a little bit more about it later in the programme.
Yes, now fresh images have emerged showing Prime Minister Boris Johnson raising a glass at a leaving party in Downing Street 8 days after he imposed England's second national coronavirus lockdown.
Yes, they sparked fresh allegations that he lied to Parliament, of course. Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, tells us more.
This was one of the parties the Met was investigating. It was taken on November the 13th, 2020, when England was in lockdown. The question, why some people at this party were fined for breaking COVID rules, but the PM wasn't. More pictures, plus WhatsApp messages and emails between Number 10 staff are said to be on the way when Sue Gray publishes her full report. There'll also be more details about 16 events held over 11 months between May 2020 and April 2021. 12 of those were investigated by the Met, with 83 people fined, including both the Chancellor and the PM, for attending his birthday celebrations in June 2020.
I understand the anger that many will feel that I myself fell short when it came to observing the very rules which the government I lead had introduced to protect the public.
Sue Gray is also likely to name some of the civil servants who broke COVID rules. And it might also answer key questions like why some Downing Street staff were fined for attending a Number 10 garden party in May 2020, but the PM, who was there, wasn't. This will be the warts and all version, after her initial report in January said the Downing Street garden was used for inappropriate gatherings without clear authorisation or oversight. There was an excessive consumption of alcohol in Downing Street and failures of leadership and judgment by different parts of Number 10 and the Cabinet Office. What the report won't answer is whether the PM lied to Parliament when he said this.
And that no COVID rules were broken, and that is what I have been repeatedly assured.
That's the job of Parliament's Cross-Party Privileges Committee. They'll begin their investigation as soon as Sue Gray publishes her report. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
And thanks to Paul for that context there. It's interesting, of course, if someone has misled Parliament, they have to have knowingly misled Parliament. And I think there's an open question there as to whether the Prime Minister would have himself described walking into an office, giving a quick speech as a party.
Yeah, somebody actually emailed in and made that point earlier. They said what the Prime Minister said is that specifically he was assured it wasn't breaking the COVID rules. So that's not technically him saying he thought he wasn't breaking the technicalities of it. So he might be able to get away with it based on what he said in terms of
semantics, isn't it? All of this, yeah.
Well, joining us now is Sean Worth, the Director of Strategy at the Westminster Policy Institute and former Downing Street advisor as well. Joins us now. Thank you for joining us. What do you make of all this? Because to most people, and people emailing in just now and this morning, they're fed up of it.
Yeah, they probably are sick of it right now. I mean, finally, I think the leaking of this new photo, because that's all we've got at the moment, is helpful to the Prime Minister, which may sound strange, but I think, we're all waiting for this Sue Gray report to come out, which allegedly contains, a warts and all description of what went on, as you said. But it probably won't contain anything more than the picture basically demonstrates he was having, toasting a something going on with a load of wine bottles around him, and that's probably the worst that's going to happen. That's the worst sort of image, I guess you could imagine. And call me cynical, I might imagine that was leaked deliberately so that when the Sue Gray report comes out, the only really story there is, a news story to take forward, is probably who else was around, and you're pointing then at civil servants, because we already know the PM has had a drink and been fined, and we're kind of moving on from it. So I think it's possibly even helpful for him.
That's interesting. So you consider that potentially this wasn't a leak that came from someone opposed to the Prime Minister, it wasn't a leak that came from Dominic Cummings, but potentially a leak from someone supporting the Prime Minister?
I've got no evidence for that, but all I'm saying is I think the landing of a Sue Gray report, how long have we been waiting for this? It must be 2 or 3 months or something ridiculous. So there's a huge amount of speculation around it. And it was alleged that there are lots and lots of photos in there. So that would have been the killer photo if you saw that in the Sue Gray report. We've waited 3 months for it, and then here finally is this evidence of this, loads of booze on a table and him raising a glass. That's been released before it to spike the landing of that report, I think. I've no evidence for that it's been deliberate, but if it has, then good on them. If it hasn't, then if they were trying to release it to make this Prime Minister look bad, it's probably backfired, because it's just released it's the story we're talking about right now. We've been talking about it since yesterday. So the Sue Gray report probably won't add any more to that, and we'll start pointing at other people other than the Prime Minister, I think.
And of course, most people will have made up their minds about this whole situation about 6 months ago. I wonder how much more any new revelation or any context or any photographic evidence of a story that we already knew, how any of this actually changes anyone's mind.
Well, of course, yeah, and there are two things on that. The first is, and you just mentioned that a moment ago, that, is there a case for misleading Parliament finally on publication of this photo? And the answer to that, as I think you're alluding to, is probably no, because the Johnson line at the time was, I have been assured that no rules were broken. So if he believes that he's not breaking any rules, then that's probably admissible, permissible under the law, I would think. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but that seems logical to me. And as you rightly say, everyone's sick of it. But the second thing is, the people that should be really laying into him right now, the Labour Party, but of course their own leader is under investigation by the police for drinking at a curry. So I just don't think this story will go anywhere near the kind of scale that means a resignation, for example.
And yet the Prime Minister will have a pretty bruising time whenever this is released, of course. He's promised to come to Parliament to make a statement and to address yet again all of the questions and criticisms of members across the House. And for once, he will not be able to say, well, we need to wait for Sue Gray, for Sue Gray will have published her evidence.
Old chestnut.
Yeah, we'll wring some more news out of this thing. I mean, it will happen. I just don't think, personally, I don't think it will change much of the story we've already got, which is he admitted he did something wrong. The police investigated it. They fined him. He said sorry. He's put processes in place to stop it happening again. That's all you can really do, really, politically. Misleading Parliament is, I think, the only extra bit you can add on the back of that. And I don't think he's going to be culpable for that. But of course, the MPs will all want to. He has opponents on his own backbenchers, for example, and they'll want to put him through the ringer a bit. But as I say, he would have got a really rough time had Keir Starmer currently not been under investigation by the police, but obviously he is. So, that's the classic. So anyone from that side of the fence that tries to criticise him, the rejoinder is obviously, well, your own leader is currently under investigation for the police, so I'm not going to take any lessons from you. So I think increasingly that he's going to try and I think he is going to get past this, and people will get bored of it and move on to the next thing.
Well, Sean Worth, thank you so much for your analysis there. Of course, the Director of Strategy at the Westminster Policy Institute. Really appreciate your time this morning, and we'll look forward to that report coming out a little bit later this week.
Yes, now, coming up, we'll be hearing from the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Lucky us about the capital's new tube line, the Elizabeth line, which opened this morning. That's all after this break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Well, good morning. This is To The Point, and it's 11:25. You're watching us here, Mercy Moroki and Tom Harwood today, standing in for Patrick Christys, and we're live on your TV, online and radio.
That's right. Well, to our next story this hour. It's taken more than 10 years to build and it's cost £19 billion. But finally, the Elizabeth line opened to the public this morning after a 3.5-year delay.
Yes, well, the new underground rail line is expected to serve 200 million passengers every year and will cut many commuters' journey time in half.
And our London reporter, Alice Porter, joins us now live from Paddington Station. It has to be said, just very close to our studios here. I'm looking forward to taking the train myself. I believe you're actually in Woolwich, Alice, which is the other end of the line. Tell us what you have to say about Crossrail.
Hello there, good morning. Well, what a morning I've had. You're quite right, Tom. I was at Paddington just as people were queuing up to get on the first Elizabeth line train, which went just after 6:30. And I have to say, there had been people there who'd been there since 1 o'clock in the morning, who travelled all over the country. When I spoke to them, I said, why have you come all the way down? Why have you been out since 1 in the morning? And they said that this is a bit of history. And I think this is really important to stress, that this has been an extraordinary engineering feat to cross from Berkshire through to London, onto Essex, 73 miles. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary feat of engineering that they've been able to do. And there has been an incredible atmosphere with so many people at the stations. I started off in Paddington this morning, and I have to say, I got one of the first trains along here to Woolwich. It was a very seamless seamless journey. And I have to say, even though I'm not a particular train enthusiast, you couldn't help but marvel at the station. The station is just this absolutely beautiful design of really, really large space, and it feels very different to some of the other stations that we have in London. Now, I was speaking to the Mayor for London, Sadiq Khan, just a bit earlier. He was here in Woolwich, and I was asking him what his reaction was to the Elizabeth line, and this is what he had to say to me.
I think it's a day when we should be proud to be British. It's a remarkable piece of British ingenuity. The train I was on, made in Derby, the station doors, made in Cheshire, the signage in the Isle of Wight, the still came from Dorset, and this is, I would say, experts agree, the best railway line in the world.
Wow. The best railway line in the world. That is a strong line from the Mayor. Although it's not all bells and whistles. This has been significantly over budget as a project, and of course it's been delayed as well. What have been the problems here?
Yeah, absolutely. It was meant to cost £15 billion, and that went all the way up to £19 billion, which, to put into context, this was double the cost involved with London hosting the Olympics. So I think it gives some suggestion there of the scale of the amount of money that was used. And it was, of course, so very, very late. It was meant to open in 2018, and it's 3.5 years late. But I was speaking to some of the staff who were involved with the project, and they were sort of saying one of the biggest issues was trying to integrate different signalling systems, different softwares. Of course, the pandemic didn't help matters as well. That really pushed many of the engineering works needed to be done. But I do think it's worth sort of pointing out here, I mean, we are talking about, there are 10 brand new stations in London today that have been built. I mean, can you imagine the engineering feat in having to sort of tunnel down under London as people go about their day? Now, if anyone's listening to this and sort of thinking, well, you know, this is, I don't live in London, why should this sort of impact me, or why should this interest me? It's important to stress this will have an enormous impact on the economy, and that's what the Mayor for London was saying to me when I spoke to him earlier.
The funny thing is, right, your viewers may not know this, but look, my dad is a bus driver. I'm really incredibly proud of buses, love buses, but this line has turned me into a train enthusiast. I'm now a train spotter. But one of the things that we don't do good as a country is invest in long-term infrastructure projects. So we do for the first time in decades, you learn lessons. And this was a project first talked about in the 1940s. In 1991, a bill fell at the committee stage in the House of Commons. And this actual project then was reignited in the early noughties. So we're learning all the time. One of the lessons we've got to learn is don't stop now. Invest in the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, because we can do this well and we've learned the lessons. This project will contribute more than £42 billion every year towards our nation's.
That was Sadiq Khan, the Mayor for London, speaking to me there. Now, just before I go, I think it's important to say I have got into the Elizabeth line fever, and I have got a little bit of a present for both you, the two of you. So there you go, Mercy and Tom. This is, I can bring this back to work for you. I've got into the Elizabeth line fever. There's lots of merchandise that is available. I have to say, there are so many train enthusiasts who have been at the station today who are just so excited about the Elizabeth line finally operating after 13 years.
I can't tell you how delighted I am that you'll be bringing that big foam purple finger
His eyes
back
just
to the
lit
train, back to the studio. That is delightful. But also, I can't emphasise enough how jealous I am that you got to ride on the purple train.
Yeah, you wanted to do that
I'm going to do it later today.
Yeah.
I'm very, very excited. Well, Alice, thank you so much for bringing us that story there. Really exciting day for London and further afield as well. Thanks for coming to us.
Yes, now let's go to some of your views. Lots of you getting in touch about a whole range of things, especially that story about this 14-year-old autistic girl being strip searched. Kenneth says, as a retired Met officer, I'm so embarrassed with all of these incidents taking place within the Met. What on earth has happened to our police? I just hold on to the fact that these incidents are committed by a small minority of officers. That's Kenneth. Kevin says, I can't believe what Mercy said about the strip search. How far in the gutter are the Met Police going to be done? There's a recruitment problem. And finally, Mick says, I'm a granddaughter of an autistic teenage girl. This is supposed to be the elite of British policing. It's horrendous for any teenage child, let alone an autistic child, that self-harm. So concerning to people who, particularly people who have children or grandchildren.
Really concerning, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just finally, two little comments on the Elizabeth line. Paul has written in to say this is a bit London-centric. Whoop-de-doo, the government spent billions on transport links in London so people don't have to walk a few yards to change trains.
10 years, was it, that it took in total?
Absolutely.
We were only little uns, weren't we?
We certainly were, but Paul's talking about getting links up in the northeast, and hopefully what we've learned from Crossrail is it's possible to do, and I'm really hopeful that the government might be doing something potentially in the future to link up some of those great cities in the north, creating a big hub. I mean, Manchester and Liverpool are not that far away, and yet they feel so far away, the distance of time travelled.
Maybe as part of their levelling up agenda, that's what they should be cracking on
Absolutely
with.
should.
But after the break, we'll be returning to that shocking story in the media, in the newspapers today about that strip searching of a teenage girl, and we'll be speaking to former Met Superintendent Leroy Logan, so stay with us for that.
It's 11:33. Good morning. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Downing Street is reportedly expecting to receive Sue Gray's report into lockdown parties tomorrow. Boris Johnson is now facing fresh questions about whether he lied to Parliament. Why? Well, leaked photographs published by ITV News show him raising a glass at a leaving do in November 2020. Boris Johnson had told MPs there was no party that day. Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Jonathan Ashworth says it's time for the Prime Minister to quit.
I don't understand how he can reconcile what he said at the dispatch box in Parliament when he said there was no party that day with these photos. Now, you know, in the olden days, lying at the dispatch box was a resigning matter.
West Ham footballer Kurt Zouma has admitted kicking and slapping his pet cat. Appearing in court, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts under the Animal Welfare Act. The 27-year-old was forced to apologise after video of the incident was shared by his younger brother. MPs are calling for the resignation of Sir Philip Barton over what they've described as deep failures of leadership during the evacuation of Kabul. The most senior civil servant at the Foreign Office stayed on holiday until the operation in Afghanistan was completed. The Foreign Affairs Committee says he showed determination to avoid unearthing facts during its inquiry. Crossrail's Elizabeth line is now open to the public. Hundreds of people from across the country queued in central London, hoping to be among some of the first passengers. The London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, described it as a game changer that will benefit the whole country. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.251 to the dollar. The pound is 1.182 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,484.19 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning to you. It's 11:38 and this is To The Point with me, Tom Harwood, and Mosi Moroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and on your radio this morning.
Yes, now returning to a story we were speaking about half an hour ago, the mother of a 14-year-old girl says her daughter was strip-searched by police and was left traumatised by the incident while the teenager was reportedly handcuffed and had her underwear cut off in the presence of male officers. That's according to her mother.
Yes, London's Metropolitan Police says it was investigating the incident. It follows, of course, the case of child Q, a 15-year-old black pupil who was strip-searched at school after she was wrongly accused of possessing drugs. The 14-year-old we're talking about today was strip-searched in December 2020, the very same month as child Q.
Yes, well, joining us now to talk us through this is former Met Superintendent Leroy Logan. Gosh, that's a bit of a mouthful.
Who's super in and of himself in his own way as well.
Indeed.
Superintendent.
Well, welcome to the programme, Leroy. Thanks for joining us. Now, I just want you to tell me how this can happen. Is this allowed to happen? We discussed it not long ago, and I rattled off all these facts. You know, she's 14. Her mother says she's autistic. Was self-harming, which was accepted in court. You know, all these things, and yet this still happened. How?
Well, it seems that there's a real necessity to find out where the culture of the organisation's gone, because it's quite clear that there's more and more of these cases, because there's a real issue around underreporting. And young people not even telling their parents what has happened to them. And there seems to be this adultification of young people when they should be protected and more safeguarding measures. Regardless of the risk they pose, they still need to be seen as in need of safeguarding. So it seems like, despite the officers being trained and know the responsibilities, it seems to be disregarded by certain assumptions they make around those young people. And of course, there's the issues of racial profiling that we've seen in all these powers: stop and search, Section 60 roadblocks, the excessive use of force with tasers, use of handcuffs, etc. So we're getting this perfect storm of heavy-handed policing on young black people in a way that doesn't seem to be slowing down. And I wonder what's happening with the supervisors. The sergeants and inspectors are supposed to hold these officers to account.
So when that accusation has been put to the Met that they're over-policing black children in particular, especially in relation to these searches, what they've come back and said is, well, it's intelligence-led. We're intelligence-led, so, you know, we're not driven by any racial element. What would be your response to that?
Well, I know better. I spent 30 years watching how the Met Police try and justify the use of these powers and not being real with themselves. They're in total denial. The facts speak for themselves over decades. McPherson inquiry over 20 years ago showed the use of this power and others was totally subject to racial profiling, hence them being called institutionally racist. And today, the race action plan that the National Police Chief Council have actually produced has said there is a problem. They are using their powers disproportionately, and a lot of that needs to change. So for the Met to then say, oh, it's all intelligence-led, it's just like, you know, the past commissioner saying, oh, we deal with rogue officers if they're shown to be disproportionate. And we've seen that they don't, less than 5% are actually dealt with. So they're in total denial as far as I'm concerned.
Look, obviously, you know, I'm not white. I think that's quite obvious. So I have obviously no interest in there being a disproportionate number of black people being stopped and searched. That's self-evident. But if I was white, I would say, well, hang on, maybe the number of ethnic minority children being stopped and searched, maybe it's representative to sort of who's in the area or who's being suspected of crime. I would also say perhaps, well, the same might happen to a white kid. If a white kid had been accused of robbing somebody at a knife point, maybe the same thing would have happened to them. We don't know. What would you respond to that?
Well, I hear the street population argument all the time, and that's been discredited. I was based in Westminster, majority white community. And guess what? Disproportionate number of people stopped and searched are black, invariably young black youngsters. Now, I'm not saying that the tool of stop and search shouldn't be used, but it has to be intelligence-based. And a lot of it comes from the community. The more the people trust you, the more the community trusts you, they'll give you the information of who's doing wrong, who is stashing the drugs, the weapons, etc. And because we've got this disconnect between the police and the public, especially the black community, and the police think they can stop and search their way out of the problem or arrest their way out of the problem, we've got a widening gap, we've got barriers, and we're not seeing a solution to how especially the Met has this real propensity to stop and search. They're one of 43 force areas, and they account for over 50% of all stop and searches nationally. So that's a massive issue. And not to mention that thousands of strip searches that take place in the police stations without good reason. You know, a lot of custody officers say, oh, I have to strip search everyone for security reasons. Well, that's not in the codes of practice, and it shouldn't be done. So in a lot of ways, that you have to ask, what is leadership doing to hold these rogue officers to account and to ensure that it doesn't happen again? And that's why I say even this race action plan is there, published today, is there to deal with this matter, because it's a growing matter, and I really believe the police are in crisis and they need to deal with it once and for all.
Well, former Met Police Superintendent Leroy Logan, thank you so much for giving us your thoughts this morning. Really interesting stuff to think over. And it's so hard to think how these two different sides, sort of a community that doesn't want to talk to the police, that doesn't trust the police, and in the same way, the police who seem to be, in so many cases, going beyond what the guidance says. How do you meet those two in the middle? How do you repair those relationships?
I think it's always complicated. I'm not sure I entirely agree. You can use the numbers. You can say, oh, London's one of 44 forces, but then again, the population's massive, and I think 1 in 6 of the population of England live in. So there are numbers.
I suppose the vast majority, or at least the vast plurality of ethnic minority people live in London. Elsewhere in the country, there's just a different...
You know, I don't necessarily I do find some of the arguments made in this conversation a bit simplistic, personally, but, you know, there is a point. But the thing is with things like racially profiling people is you can never prove it. So it almost always just falls into speculation about this, that and the other, because you can essentially never prove whether somebody's been stopped because they've been racially profiled or not.
Yeah, really thorny issue, a tricky one to deal with, which is why I suppose it continues to persist. But let's turn to something positive as we head towards the end of the show. Yes, is it DIY to the rescue for many of us in these tough times? Despite the cost of living crisis in the UK, the owners of B&Q have said it's seeing a resilient demand for DIY.
Yes, well, the company expects DIY demand to be resilient in the coming months, despite the expectation that consumer spending will drop as households' budgets are squeezed by inflation. Well, I'm very excited about this. because I'm a massive DIY fan. We're joined by Craig Phillips, who's TV personality and builder. If you don't recognise him, where have you been for the last couple of decades? He's known for winning the first Big Brother series in 2000, and he's also a trained builder. Thank you for joining us. I love DIY.
Good morning, Mercy.
Good morning. I think DIY is my favourite hobby, I would say. I love doing it. I do it as therapy. Recently, I've been repainting the kitchen cabinets. I'm painting the garden fence at the moment. I love it. More people should get into
Brilliant.
it. More people should get into it.
Brilliant. Absolutely. I encourage everybody to get into it, you know, and as some of the figures are showing at the moment, DIY is just on the up and up. And sometimes it's because people can't afford to have a tradesman, you know. We're all very tested at the moment with the cost of living going up. We're getting stretched that little bit more. But our houses are still taking the wear and tear. We're still spending more time at home. We're not going on as many exotic holidays as we used to nowadays, you know. So I think everyone is turning to the tools themselves. And I think once they have a little go of doing DIY themselves, like yourself, Mercy, you start to enjoy it. It's quite therapeutic and you get better and better at it. The more you get better at it, the more you want to do it.
And sorry, Tom, I'll let you in a second. I'm very excited. Isn't it the case as well as sort of the action of doing the DIY, whether you're putting up a shelf or whatever, and that gets you, you know, going and gets you active, there's also the aspect of completely transforming a room or a house. It can completely change the feel of the place, can't it? I recently put wallpaper in my mum's kitchen because it was a horrible green colour, and so the wall was a horrible green colour. So I painted in white, put up a nice brick wall kind of effect background, and it completely transformed the area. My mum walked in, she was like, it's so bright in here. You can completely transform your house with DIY.
Fantastic.
I know, I'm very excited. Yeah, like a puppy right now.
That sounds fantastic, Maisie. It's great that you're doing so much, you know, but you're right in what you say. Just a small little bit of DIY, doing a small facelift to a room can not only make the room feel better and the atmosphere, but make you feel better as well. You know, during the first lockdown, we had thousands of messages coming through on our social media and our YouTube channels asking more and more questions about DIY, but a lot of people were saying, it's helped me get through the tough times. It's helped me get through the lonely times. And just by applying a little bit of brighter paint to a wall here and there and a little bit of wallpaper, creating a focal point, you know, it makes them feel better. And that's what it's all about, you know. I often say to people, our homes are probably the biggest cost or biggest investment that we ever make in our entire lives. So I believe it's our responsibility to make it look good, preserve it, maintain it the best you can. And of course, you're putting value on the house as well. The more work you can do, the better you can keep it. You're always going to keep the value up on your house.
I wonder if it's not all such a positive story there, and sorry to be a downer here, but there is a big problem with a shortage of labour in the building industry. I know that a lot of people are really struggling to get people to come in and do things to their house. Obviously, the demand has increased. Everyone being locked in their house for 2 years have probably thought, I should fix this or I should fix that. Are people turning to DIY because they have no other option? And when should people know their own limits? When might they be making things worse?
Yeah, it's a good point, Tom. You know, people are having to force to do it themselves because there's a lack of trades out there, you know, tradesmen and tradeswomen. Even I struggle when we're doing some of our online videos. I need a team to work off camera with me and we need to prep things before we do it. And I'm struggling to get them trades to help me. So that's probably one reason why people are having to turn to DIY. They can't afford them, they can't wait for them, or they can't actually find them as well. So I think overall, the more people that can teach themselves, let's say self-taught, you know, our online videos nowadays, they're getting more and more hits and we're getting more and more demand to make more. I think because it's so easy to get access to that knowledge and get experts' advice and little tips that can save them money and save them time and do a safe job as well, you know. I think that's swaying more and more people to do it, where 5-10 years ago, the internet wasn't as good. There wasn't as many videos out there that people could actually learn from.
Yes, I suppose before you embark upon a big project, maybe start something small and definitely look up how to do it online first.
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely.
Well, I hate to do this, but we do have to go now. I could speak about DIY. But Craig Phillips, thank you so much for joining us, TV
My pleasure.
personality
Thank you.
and builder, of course. I think I got as enthusiastic about DIY as you got about trains earlier.
Together, we could build a veritable station.
Yes, absolutely. Two great minds think alike. Eh? We will build maybe we could build it in the north, which is where
we
they
absolutely
need it.
we need to connect Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, and Sheffield.
Yeah.
That's where Crossrail 3 needs to go. Anyway,
let's finish off with a few of the headlines that you might have missed. Lighter ones at that. A man in Leyland blocked a McDonald's drive-through for hours after being told to park and wait for his double sausage and egg McMuffin to be cooked.
Yes, 55-year-old Stuart Yates said he had refused to go and wait as last time he got told to do so. It took his order took over 15 minutes. That was written very weirdly. His order took over 15 minutes, which he wasn't happy about at all. The standoff lasted for 2 hours as he remained parked in the order window after he was refused service for being, quotes, too threatening.
Well, yes, police were called. They are said to have diffused the situation after being called to the scene. I mean, that is quite a hill to die on, isn't it? I'm gonna stay in this lane until I get
I just don't quite understand why it took so long to cook him his...
I don't think it took him that long. I think maybe he started making a fuss about it, and then they probably...
And then they were like, well, I'm not going to give you your food anyway, and then it's a standoff. I see.
I mean, it's an odd hill to die on, I suppose. Now, another one. Staff at the accountancy firm, KPMG, have been told to hold back from revealing where they went on their gap year or what private school they attended, all in an effort to create a more inclusive and diverse workplace.
Yes, according to the firm's mandatory unconscious bias training, these topics can isolate others.
I boo-hoo.
All staff must undertake the training or risk losing their bonuses. Oh, well, actually, boo-hoo to that.
I'll tell you what, if you can't handle being in the same room as somebody when they're discussing that they went to private school or they're going skiing, you probably aren't apt to be working at one of the biggest accountancy firms on the planet, and you should probably, get another job.
Well, yeah.
Because you're clearly not grown up. If you're upset that somebody else went to private school. Sorry, I'm done.
No, tell us what you really think.
Former KPMG boss, Bill Michael, left the company altogether over the training, calling it, quote, complete and utter crap.
I mean, companies waste so much money on this stuff. You'd think that they could hire more people or raise wages rather than getting in this...
It's a racket. I'm telling you, it's a racket. And the people who are charging, who are, unconscious bias consultants, who are charging companies tens of thousands of pounds to tell their employees they're unconsciously... It's a complete and utter racket.
Well,
that's my view.
No, I think that will be a view that's held by many people. But finally, a little girl thought to be permanently blind has regained her sight and learned how to walk, to the complete surprise of her doctors.
Yes, really good news. Evie May Gertz, just 7 years of age, was diagnosed with a rare brain condition at 8 months old. That is usually incurable, but after many surgeries, not only has her sight returned, but she's also learned how to walk and talk. And even better still, she's completely condition-free and top of her class for academics. See, this is an amazing feel-good story to end the show. And this is why I say you should never... let me word this carefully. You should take what doctors say with a pinch of scepticism, because I've heard of so many stories where doctors have said, oh, your baby, they're going to be permanently brain damaged. They're going to have, not going to be able to walk and talk. They're not going to have any quality of life. And then, people do have miraculous...
Well, there are some miraculous... But I suppose you have responsibility as a doctor to not build up false hope. If 1% of cases might be miraculously... But it does seem that we do have medical science advancing in such a way, and whilst there are so many other problems in the world, and there's inflation and there's war and there's lockdowns and there's everything else, it's good to point out where we're advancing and where the world is getting unquestionably better.
Yes, that we can agree on. Now, tomorrow is Wednesday. We want you to tell us what you want us to talk about. Get your story suggestions in to the point at GBNews.uk. The entire programme of tomorrow will be dedicated to what you want to talk about, so get them in. But that is it from us here at To The Point with me and Tom. And don't go away. Up next is The Briefing with Gloria De Piero. See you tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A day of sunny spells and showers for most of us. Some lively downpours with thunder and hail in the south. But it does turn drier from the west later as a little ridge of high pressure moves in. However, it's the low in the North Sea that is driving the showers across many parts of the country during the bulk of the day, and those showers already getting going out there. Some lively downpours and hail and thunder possible for southern parts. It will be gusty in the far northeast, but for many it's light winds, and that means the showers will be slow moving, but also there'll be an improvement from the west later, increasingly sunny spells coming through. 18 Celsius in Cardiff, 19 or 20 in London, 16 for Belfast and Glasgow. Into the evening then, and we're going to see the showers continue for a time for eastern Scotland, eastern England as well. Eventually they die away, and then a slice of